Good afternoon. This is Jennifer Reynolds. I'm the Director of Ecosystem Restoration and Capital Projects Division at the South Florida Water Management District. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. We have about 150 people joining our Zoom meeting as we speak, so I'm going to give folks just a couple of more moments to get connected. As we're getting connected into the meeting, I'd just like to thank everyone for joining us on this Friday afternoon. I'd like to encourage you to grab your notes. I hope you will find this workshop today informative and interesting. I hope it generates ideas and questions, and I hope it also gets you a little excited and hopeful about the progress we are making together to tackle water challenges across the Northern Everglades and the Northern Estuaries. Our intent with this and our other Watershed Protection Plan workshops is to engage the public in a robust conversation about what it takes to solve our water quality crisis. The South Florida Water Management District can't do it alone. We don't have the authority or the funding or all the tools to do it by ourselves. It takes many state and local agencies, nonprofit groups, landowners, businesses, and informed members of the public to make it work. We hope that you find today's presentations helpful in providing the resources that you need in order to hold us, the South Florida Water Management District, accountable for our role and to hold other state and local agencies accountable for their responsibilities and their roles. And we hope it gives you the tools to help encourage all entities to take reasonable actions within their own control. I believe that by starting with the science of the land and the water, we can all work together to chip away at what may seem like an insurmountable water quality dilemma. But really, it's a collection of smaller water solutions just waiting for us to implement them together. We have representatives from many agencies and organizations on the line today. Thank you for joining us. And thank you to the members of the public for your interest, for your collaboration, and for your commitment to clean water, for our environment, for our people, for our fish, birds, and animals, for our businesses, and really for our whole way of life here in South Florida. So I'd like to introduce our primary presenter today, Ms. Jody Hutchins. She's one of our lead engineers from our Everglades and Estuary Protection Program section of our organization. And she will be providing the bulk of our presentation today. So at this time, I will turn it over to Jody, and thank you again for joining us.
Thank you, Jennifer. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the third in our series of Watershed Protection Planning workshops. Today's focus will be on the St. Lucie River watershed. As we begin, we have found that there are benefits to holding questions and discussions until designated times, so that is how we will proceed today. This presentation is 24 slides long. We will have the Zoom Q&A feature going throughout the presentation, so feel free to type in questions that you may have at any time. And then at the end of the presentation, we will answer your questions. We will also be using the Mentee interactive feature. If you participated in the last workshop on the Lake Okeechobee watershed, you may be familiar with it. It is our opportunity to ask you questions and get your feedback. We will have two separate Mentee surveys today, one at the beginning of the presentation and one at the end. And then at the end of this meeting, we're going to be taking public comments. And in the interest of allowing everyone an opportunity to speak, each person will have one 3-minute period to make their comments. Let's begin with Menti with some icebreaker questions. Menti is really simple to use and you do not need an account. You just need to open up a second browser, but do not close out of this Zoom meeting because we'll be displaying the results of the Menti survey in real time. Please sign in by following the instructions on the screen and put in today's code, which is listed on the slide. We will give you a moment to get signed in, and then we will get started. I'm going to turn it over to MD Josen, one of our lead scientists in our unit, to lead us through today's Menti survey. MD will share his screen and will also display this Menti code on his screen for those who have not yet had a chance to sign in.
Jody, thank you for your kind introduction, and I wish to extend a warm welcome to everyone for joining us for the workshop. Your responses to the interactive session shall remain anonymous. As Jody alluded, today's interactive session will be in two parts. The part one will start with a few icebreaker questions, followed by a general inquiry related to the St. Lucie River watershed. I will give everyone about 1 minute to answer each question. The second interactive session will begin after the Q&A session. For the first question, have you participated in a watershed protection plan workshop before? Please answer yes, no, or unsure. So far, 26 respondents have responded, and majority of them have already been to a workshop. Thank you very much. And we have some new participants as well today. So thank you so much for coming and attending Watershed Protection Workshop. Our next question is, have you visited our website on the Northern Everglades Watershed Protection Plans? Please answer yes or no. The Watershed Protection Plans website holds a key information for all the watershed protection plans and other information from the previous work has done by the district. So highly encouraged for public who have not had a chance to attend the visit the website, please mark the bookmark and visit it. Would you please list one or two words that come to mind when you think of St. Lucie River watershed projects? And you can start typing your ideas and it will appear on the screen. We got flooding, water quality. It's complicated. It's expensive. We need clean water. Algae is an issue. A phosphorus is an issue. We need local collaborations. And you can see the word cloud is giving us an opportunity to show that majority is focusing responses are going toward clean, having better water quality, clean water, clean estuaries. Thank you very much. This concludes the part 1 of the interactive session. You may close your browser window now. Now I am going to hand over to Jody Hutchinson for an information-packed presentation. Jody, it's yours.
Thank you, MD. The purpose of today's meeting is to provide a transparent and collaborative opportunity for the public to engage in the process of identifying projects, activities, and programs to improve water quality. The district will consider information gathered from the public as we review and update the watershed protection plans for meeting water quality objectives. I will begin with a brief recap of the past 2 workshops. Then I will go into an overview of the St. Lucie River watershed and a summary of the data. The goal of today's workshop is to present information on the areas that the South Florida Water Management District is considering for the first areas to do detailed assessments and focus resources. To do this, the district has reviewed all of the data in the St. Lucie River watershed, and the data seems to point to areas we should take a closer look at. But keep in mind that we are not locked into any particular area for conducting these assessments. And the areas of focus can be big, for example, an entire basin, or small, a localized area within the basin. And there may be things that you know about an area that we do not, and we hope that these workshops will help to uncover that. We hope you've had a chance to review the handouts that were provided for today's meeting. If you have not, you can pull them up now by visiting our website, shown by the link on this slide. The strategy for the Watershed Protection Plan workshops is laid out on this slide. In June, we gave an overview of the coordinating agency's roles under the Northern Everglades and Estuaries Protection Program statute, also known as NEP, which provides the statutory authority for restoration of the Northern Everglades. The coordinating agencies are the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, and the South Florida Water Management District. In June, we explained that the district is charged with updating the watershed protection plans and our approach for those updates. In July, we focused on the Lake Okeechobee watershed. Today, we will be focusing on the St. Lucie River watershed. And next week on September 2nd, we will focus on the Caloosahatchee River watershed. If you are unable to attend the previous workshops and would like to see the presentation or the video, you may go to the website listed on this slide. Now let's do a quick recap on the coordinating agency's roles. This schematic provides a high-level overview and connects the dots on how the activities of the coordinating agencies come together under the overall NEP restoration strategy. The district's responsibility is the watershed protection plans. This consists of the research and water quality monitoring programs, which feeds into the watershed construction project, which includes constructed facilities as well as programs. The boxes connected by the blue arrows show how this fits together to support the BMAPs also known as basin management action plans, and achieving goals. And remember that the BMAPs are the plans to achieve restoration goals, or the total maximum daily loads, also known as TMDLs. And these are set by FDEP. FDEP uses the latest science, data, and other information to update BMAPs. And much of the science and data comes from the watershed protection plans. So at these workshops, the focus is to build upon the existing watershed protection plans. Based on the latest information, we will be identifying additional activities and projects within the watersheds to assist in achieving water quality goals in support of the BMAPs. This iterative process of reviewing and updating the watershed protection plans and BMAPs is important to manage the latest and greatest information to adjust the course and stay on track. This slide describes the information that is collected and updated in the Research and Water Quality Monitoring Program and Watershed Construction Project and Programs to provide input to FDEP's BMap process. FDEP's process includes annual BMap progress reports and 5-year BMap updates that incorporate information from local, regional, and state entities to evaluate progress towards meeting the TMDL. The district includes important updates in the watershed protection plans that help to inform these BMap updates. Science and monitoring is part of the Research and Water Quality Monitoring Program, and project and program updates are part of the Watershed Construction Project and Programs. The Research and Water Quality Monitoring Program includes data analysis from the district's monitoring network, including flow, water quality, participation, and biological monitoring. This includes monitoring programs at major water control structures, upstream tributaries within the watershed, and monitoring programs within the estuary itself. The Watershed Construction Project and Programs consists of treatment and storage facilities, including public works and public-private partnerships, while the programs are comprised of regulatory and non-regulatory programs, incentive-based programs, and non-structural projects. The approach for identifying solutions is laid out on this slide. We reviewed and summarized water quality data. For example, the information that was provided and the handouts posted to the website. This data will assist in prioritizing the areas to assess first, present what the data is showing, and get local expertise and feedback. Once these areas are prioritized, the district plans to shine the spotlight on these areas by completing detailed assessments. Well, we will determine what is already being done by accounting for existing projects and programs, but the district does not have control over them all. And we can reach out to others that may have their own projects and programs for a holistic approach. Then we will determine what remains to be done and what we can do better. For example, adjusting projects' performance based on measured data for tracking nutrient reductions. We also want to determine if there are some quick fix solutions that we can immediately implement, as well as build upon existing long-term plans. And again, we are not limiting ourselves to this type of work for the areas prioritized. As we move forward and begin our assessments, we can adapt and change course as needed that best meets the needs for accomplishing restoration goals. After these assessments are completed, we will have additional workshops to facilitate discussions. We will also provide feedback to the coordinating agencies and local entities on the assessment results so they can consider applicable adjustments into their programs. The district has an internal team of experts, scientists, and engineers with experience on the Northern Everglades landscape. Their expertise is in water quality, nutrient treatment technologies, STAs, and lake and estuary ecology. This team has reviewed the data from the St. Lucie River watershed basins and considered the information shown by this slide. Data parameters reviewed were total nutrient load and unit area load, discharge volume and runoff, and flow weighted mean concentration. And the definitions of these parameters are shown by this slide as a refresher from the past two workshops. Just a reminder on the distinction between total load and unit area load. When reviewing total load, one would expect a greater amount of load from a basin that is of larger size. But by looking at the data in terms of unit area load, you're able to make a relative comparison of the loads from areas that may differ in size. Additional considerations that were made for prioritizing the St. Lucie River watershed focus areas were project site selection and feasibility of implementation, the proximity to receiving water body, which in today's case is the St. Lucie estuary, planned projects and their expected reductions, and areas with a potential for quick fix, such as subject to sewer projects versus long-term regional projects. Now here is a map of the St. Lucie River watershed, which is approximately 540,000 acres. For quantifying nutrients to the St. Lucie estuary, the watershed is divided into 6 contributing areas. Lake Okeechobee releases to the estuary. The St. Lucie basins, which include the C44, the C23, the C24, and 10 Mile Creek basins, and the tidal basins. The tidal basins include the North Fork Basin, Basin 456, the North Mid-Estuary, the South Fork Basin, the South Mid-Estuary, and the South Coastal Basin. These tidal basins are downstream of the district's major water control structures and are served by numerous tributaries that discharge directly to either the North Fork or the South Fork of the St. Lucie River, or directly to the St. Lucie estuary. Lake Okeechobee discharges are conveyed through the C44 basin and is released to the South Fork of the St. Lucie River. Runoff from the C44 basin discharges to the South Fork of the St. Lucie River, while the C24 and 10 Mile Creek basins discharge to the North Fork of the St. Lucie River. The C23 basin discharges where the North and South Forks come together. This information is important as we review the in-estuary monitoring data that will be presented later in this presentation to understand what is potentially driving the results in the estuary. The C25 basin is not discussed in this presentation since basin runoff from the C25 is not tributary to the St. Lucie estuary. For quantifying basin water quantity and quality levels, concentration and flow are measured at the basin level monitoring sites, shown by the red squares on the map, and it enables us to review the actual measured data from the St. Lucie basins and Lake Okeechobee releases to the estuary. However, since the tidal basin's flows are uncontrolled, meaning there's no water control structure for water quantity monitoring, the district relies on modeling for quantifying flows for these areas. These modeled flows are paired with the measured concentrations at the upstream monitoring locations, shown by the green circles on the map, for calculating the nutrient loads for the tidal basins. And I would discuss more about this upstream monitoring network later in the presentation. This map depicts the land uses within the watershed. The green areas are agricultural uses, and the gray areas are non-agricultural uses, and the yellow are natural areas. You will notice that the St. Lucie basins to the west are predominantly agriculture, while the tidal basins to the east are predominantly non-ag. The St. Lucie Estuary TMDL set by FDEP is shown by this slide, and it is evaluated at the district's SE03 monitoring site, also known as the Roosevelt Bridge. It is important to track the water quality levels at this site as well as other estuarine sites. This figure depicts 2 additional in-estuary sites, one in the North Fork, HR1, and one in the South Fork, SE08B. Concentrations here are measured monthly, and sampling trips are scheduled to begin at low tide to minimize tidal influences in the measured concentrations. These monthly concentrations were reviewed for these 3 sites for the past 5 years. This plot shows the total phosphorus on the left and total nitrogen on the right for the HR1 site in the North Fork. And you can see how the monthly concentrations vary during this 5-year period by the blue and purple dots. You can also see how the average concentrations during this period compare to the TMDL. Next is the SE03 site at the TMDL compliance point. Similarly, you can see how the monthly concentrations vary and how the average concentrations for both total phosphorus and total nitrogen compare to the TMDL. And finally, this figure presents the data for the SE08B site in the South Fork. Reviewing the data for all 3 sites together, we can see that the HR1 and the SE08B sites and the North and South Forks have the highest total phosphorus concentrations, and the SE08B site in the South Fork has the highest total nitrogen concentration. As we move closer to the estuary, the SE03 Roosevelt Bridge site, the total phosphorus and total nitrogen concentrations are relatively lower. I want to take a brief pause here to let everyone know that as we present the data on the St. Lucie River watershed and how the district made its focus area selection, please consider what basins you would choose, because when we get back to the second portion of our mentee survey, we will be seeking your feedback on this question. This slide depicts the most recent 5-year average flow, total phosphorus load on the bottom left, and total nitrogen load on the bottom right, percentages for each of the St. Lucie River watershed contributors to the estuary. The data presented for Lake Okeechobee represents the measured flows and loads released to the St. Lucie estuary. Also, the flows and loads presented for the C44 basin represent basin runoff only and discounts any measured Lake Okeechobee influences on C44 basin reported levels. The flows and loads presented for the C23, C24, and 10 Mile Creek basins represent the measured basin runoff levels. And finally, the flows and loads presented for the tidal basins represents the calculated basin runoff levels based on modeled flows and measured concentrations. In all figures, the St. Lucie basins are the greatest contributor to the St. Lucie estuary. And of these basins, the C24 basin contributed the greatest amount of flow, total phosphorus, and total nitrogen load. Because we touched on Lake Okeechobee contributions on the previous slide, I wanted to provide some additional information on the lake for clarity. As the previous graphs show, the lake contributions to the St. Lucie estuary are significant and are being considered by the district and FDEP. And looking at the data and information, considering that the Northern Everglades watersheds, the Lake Okeechobee watershed, the Caloosahatchee River watershed, and the St. Lucie River watershed, these are all connected by Lake Okeechobee. However, each watershed has its own restoration goal and their own BMap. And considering the restoration goals in the St. Lucie River and Estuary BMap, FDEP does not include the necessary reductions needed to meet the TMDL for Lake Okeechobee. And this is so stakeholders within the St. Lucie River watershed are not assigned nutrient reductions for loads that may have been generated from the lake. And also because the reductions needed in the Lake Okeechobee watershed are already captured in the Lake Okeechobee BMap. More details on the model, on the methods and assumptions used to develop the reductions set by FDEP and the St. Lucie River and Estuary BMap will be provided later in this presentation. Lake Okeechobee inflows to the St. Lucie estuary are accounted for in FDEP's targeted restoration area process described in the BMap, which uses measured data for prioritizing resources. Lake Okeechobee inflows are also accounted for under the watershed protection plans through regional construction projects and programs. For example, projects such as the C44 reservoir and STA can take in water from the lake, considering the timing and volume of lake releases relative to C44 basin runoff. The following slides will focus on the St. Lucie River watershed data and discussion of watershed-specific issues and projects. This slide presents the 5-year averages of unit area load, flow-weighted mean concentration, runoff, and acreages for total phosphorus, the table on the top, and total nitrogen, the table on the bottom, for each of the St. Lucie River watershed basins. We are using the color bars to show relative magnitude. For example, the longer the bar, the greater the result. When we sort by unit area load, 2 basins come to the top for both total phosphorus and total nitrogen. These basins are 10 Mile Creek and the C24 basin. Similarly, when you consider total runoff, the same 2 basins come to the top. You may be familiar with the district's upstream monitoring program and the efforts made last year to expand this monitoring network. This monitoring program is used to get a sense of what is happening upstream of the basin level monitoring sites. The green and blue dots depict the upstream monitoring sites where total phosphorus and total nitrogen concentrations are monitored. The green sites located in the tidal basins are the existing upstream monitoring sites where monitoring began around 2001 and are used in the nutrient load calculation for the tidal basins. The blue sites located in the C44, C23, and C24 basins make up the expanded monitoring sites where monitoring was either reinstated or just began earlier this year. And the next 2 slides summarize the results of this data. This slide depicts the average total phosphorus and total nitrogen concentrations measured at the upstream sites using all available data from the past 5 years. Samples here are collected bi-weekly through grabs, and only when flow can be observed by the sample collection staff. It is important to note that because these sites were just added or reinstated, there were a limited number of samples available for this review. The color of the semicircles indicate the level of total nitrogen concentration, the left side of the circle, and total phosphorus concentration, the right side of the circle, with the lowest level, the green, being below the TMDL. The teal polygons on the map depict the areas that are represented by this upstream monitoring. Reviewing the data from the C23 basin, all upstream sites are in the highest concentration level for total phosphorus, and 2 are in the highest level, and 1 in the second highest level for total nitrogen. For reference, the concentration level observed at the downstream basin level monitoring site from the past 5 years is also presented, which indicates the second highest concentration level for TN and the highest concentration level for TP. Moving into the C24 basin, one site was in the highest level for TP and TN. One site was in the second to highest level for TP and TN. And one site in the second to highest level for TN and second to lowest level for TP. And one site has no data collected to date due to no flow observed by the sampling crew at the time of collection. Similarly, the concentration at the basin level monitoring site is also presented, which indicates the second to highest concentration level for TN and the highest concentration level for TP. For the C44 basin, 3 sites were in the second to lowest level for TP and TN, and 1 site in the lowest level for TP and second to lowest level for TN. 3 sites have no data collected to date due to no flow observed by the sampling crew at the time of sampling collection. And similarly, you can see the basin level concentration, which indicates the same as the C23 and C24 basins, second to highest concentration level for TN, and the highest concentration level for TP. Unlike the upstream monitoring network and the 3 basins we just reviewed, the upstream monitoring network and the tidal basins have been ongoing consistently since 2001. Samples here are also collected bi-weekly through grabs and only when flow is observed by the sampling crew. Also, samples are only collected when the specific conductivity is less than a certain amount. And this is to assure that samples are representative of runoff from the areas being monitored versus incoming tide. This figure depicts the monitoring sites within the North Fork and North Mid-Estuary basins. Reviewing the data from these basins, all sites are in the second to lowest level for TN. 5 sites are in the second to lowest level for TP, and 7 sites are in the lowest level for TP. 2 sites in the north were in the second to highest level for TP. The figure on the right depicts the monitoring sites within Basin 4, 5, and 6, the South Fork, the South Mid-Estuary, and South Coastal basins. Reviewing the data from these basins, all are either in the lowest or second to lowest level for total phosphorus and total nitrogen, except for 4 sites to the east, where levels were in the second to highest level for total phosphorus or total nitrogen. Generally, we can conclude that based on this upstream monitoring data that was presented, the concentration levels observed in the tidal basins and the C44 basin are generally lower compared to the upstream monitoring levels observed within the C23 and C24 basins. Now that we reviewed what the measured data is showing in the St. Lucie River watershed, let's take a look at the projections that FDEP has indicated in the BMap for achieving restoration goals. These figures from the 2020 St. Lucie River and Estuary BMap indicate that by the 15-year milestone of 2028, the St. Lucie River watershed should achieve a total of 185 metric tons of total phosphorus reductions and 568 metric tons of total nitrogen reductions. The projects and activities reported in the BMap completed through June of 2019 are estimated to achieve a total reduction of 86 metric tons of total phosphorus and 386 metric tons of total nitrogen. These results are based on modeled project performance, and it is important to track that these expected reductions are actually being observed with measured data. To get a sense on how the projected nutrient reductions presented on the previous slide are broken down by basin, take a look at this slide. These tables include data presented by FDEP and the 2020 BMap and provide averaged modeled concentration estimates for each basin. Total phosphorus is presented on the table on top and total nitrogen on the bottom. And these estimates from DEP are based on the best available data at the time. A couple of important points to consider when reviewing this information. As described in the BMap, these estimates were developed using the WASH hydrologic and water quality model and were calibrated and verified with the district's monitoring data. Next, FDEP compared these averaged modeled concentration estimates to the TMDL concentrations for each basin to develop the basin level required reductions shown by this slide. And you can see that the highest nutrient reductions are for the C23 and C24 basins. Because of our dynamic South Florida system, it is expected that basin levels will change with time and may warrant future model updates. For example, reviewing the most recent 5-year average concentrations reported by the district, the most notable changes in concentrations are for the C44, 10 Mile Creek, and tidal basins for total phosphorus, and the C44 basin for total nitrogen. But keep in mind that there are many factors that must be considered when comparing this measured data to modeled. For example, the period of record for the modeled data that is presented is based on calendar year 2007 through 2016 for a scenario where Lake Okeechobee is meeting the TMDL concentrations, while the measured data that is presented is based on the past 5-year averages of water year 2016 through water year 2020. We also need to consider the difference in the assumptions made to estimate these basin level concentrations. For example, the BMap estimates the allowable levels for stakeholder allocations, while the district reports the measured basin concentration levels. So why is this information important? Well, first of all, it's to demonstrate the iterative process between the coordinating agencies to assure that the latest and greatest information is made available in the watershed protection plans to inform program updates. But more importantly, to understand how these nutrient reductions reported in the BMap were developed and what they represent, to inform watershed protection plan updates and future plans for additional projects and programs. Now that we have a general idea of the nutrient reductions established in the BMap, let's take a look at the existing and future project and programs for achieving these reductions. The table on the left are the BMap reduction goals converted to metric tons per year. The table in the center lists the project reduction estimates for the coordinating agencies' existing projects, such as interim water farming projects, and future projects, such as the Indian River Lagoon South SERP projects. The other projects include reduction estimates from the projects listed in the BMap, for example, septic to sewer, local entity water farms, and detention ponds. These expected reductions from projects are all estimates and are subject to change based on actual project performance. Also, only projects with known reductions are accounted for. For example, there may be future projects in the BMap with nutrient reductions listed as to be determined. Those are not accounted for in these estimates. And the table on the right provides the percentage of reductions that are left after these projects have been completed. The lowest percentage indicates the least amount of additional projects and programs that would be needed for that basin. And the highest percentage indicates the basins that would need the most additional projects and programs. According to these estimated projections, for the watershed as a whole, we will have a 33% deficit in total phosphate reductions and a 27% deficit in total nitrogen reductions after these projects have been completed. For the C23 basin, even though it's the greatest amount of required reductions, there are numerous existing and future projects expected to achieve the required reductions. The C24, 10 Mile Creek, and tidal basins have the greatest deficit, and the C44 basin is expected to have exceeded the reductions that would be required. Looking at the projections for watershed storage, this slide depicts the storage goal set by the St. Lucie River Watershed Protection Plan at 200,000 acre-feet per year. This table lists the agency's completed, interim, and future projects expected storage for each basin. And looking at these agencies' projects alone, the overall watershed storage goal of 200,000 acre-feet per year is expected to have been met once all projects are complete. However, it is important to verify that these expected storage goals with reductions in flows to the St. Lucie estuary. And this is something that we'll be looking at in future watershed protection plan updates. To recap, for the purpose of updating the watershed protection plan and to prioritize the areas to do detailed assessments first, we looked at the measured data from the past 5 years, which indicates the C24 and the 10 Mile Creek Basin having the highest unit area load and runoff. And the BMap required reductions by basin and the expected reductions from projects were also reviewed. The basins with the greatest deficit for achieving restoration goals were the C24 basin, the 10 Mile Creek Basin, and the tidal basins. So in summary, the St. Lucie basins were found to be the greatest contributor of the basin's total flow, total phosphorus load, and total nitrogen load to the estuary when reviewing measured data. We also can see that Lake Okeechobee is a significant contributor, and this is accounted for in the watershed protection plans through regional projects and programs, and in the BMap's targeted restoration area process. Of the St. Lucie basins, the C24 and 10 Mile Creek have the highest unit area load and runoff, and the C24, 10 Mile Creek, and tidal basins have the highest deficit and required reductions based on BMap reduction goals and the district and BMap project estimates. Upstream monitoring concentrations showed the lowest levels in the C44 basin and the tidal basins. Therefore, the C24 and 10 Mile Creek basins were selected by the district's team of experts as priorities for conducting detailed assessments. However, as mentioned before, we are not locked into any particular area to focus on. So the district's next steps will be to shine the spotlight by gathering detailed information on these focus areas. We'll be performing assessments to identify potential contributing sources and potentially responsible entities. For example, local ordinances to control urban runoff. Maybe more stricter ERPs are needed, more NOIs, and looking into septic tank hookups. Assessing existing project performance based on measured data. And we will also be coordinating with agencies to make adjustments to programs and plans as findings come to light. Finally, we will bring this information back at future public workshops. And we would appreciate any comments that you may have from the information presented today through the website by September 15th. And here is a link to the website where you can enter your comments. And now we will begin answering your questions. And we've had the Q&A feature going during the presentation. If you have not yet typed in your question, please do so now. And I will turn it over to Carmela Bejigal, who will lead us through this Q&A period.
Good afternoon, everybody. Jody, fantastic presentation. My name is Carmela Bedregal. I'm the section lead with the Northern Everglades section, and I'll be helping to facilitate the Q&A process. So looking at the questions we have already received, we have a question from Michael Connor. He's asking, why is the Army Corps of Engineers discharging C44 water into the St. Lucie River as of this morning, Friday the 28th? The rate is 1,115 cubic feet per second into an already too fresh estuary. Salinity in the South Fork is 0, and salinity in downtown Stuart is 6. The estuary needs 0 input from the S80. Why is it needed at this time? Jennifer, could you help answer this question?
Sure, I can talk about this a little bit. So I don't want to answer for the Corps, but I can talk about how water management works along the C44 canal. So the S80 lock is open right now, and I just pulled up the site, and it is flowing 1,110 cubic feet per second. The structure that opens up the lake to the C44 canal is closed. So all of that water is from the basin itself along the C44 canal. So that is runoff that is entering the canal and is being released from the S80 structure into the estuary. These are the types of flows for which the C44 reservoir is designed and is being constructed. And so these are the types of flows that will be captured in the C44 reservoir once it is complete, and that construction is scheduled to be complete next year.
Great, thank you. The next question is from Amy Eason. And this question, I think, is for Jody. It says, you mentioned that structures don't measure flows, and that is why you have to rely on modeling. Don't you take stage data that can be used to calculate flow? Please clarify the statement.
Yes, thank you. That is a great question. So let me try to clarify. When I meant by we do not measure flows, I did not mean that at the basins in which we have water control structures. Those basins that have water control structures, we do measure flows directly, and that is the data that was reflected in today's presentation. The areas that we are not able to measure flows are the areas that are downstream of those structures, and those are the areas that that we defined as the tidal basins. And that's because these areas do not have, the runoff from these areas do not come together at one single point where it's easy to measure flow. Runoff from these areas are sent to the estuary through numerous tributaries, which would be very expensive and unreliable to monitor at them all. So the district came up with a methodology to model those flows and use that modeled flow with actual measured concentrations to quantify the loads from those areas.
Great, thank you, Jody. Let me go to the next question. This question is from Gary Ritter. And his question is, you talked about input from local expertise. Please define local expertise. Jody, could you take this question also?
Sure. So, we really want to rely on the local experts. I mean, they're the ones in the field that have the on-the-ground knowledge of projects and programs and real live activities that are going on. And we need to make sure that these activities are accounted for when the district is prioritizing areas to look at, and to make sure that we have all of the information needed as we move forward and allocate resources for achieving the goals.
All right. The next question is from Mark Perry. Will we ever be able to achieve the TMDL in the St. Lucie estuary if the Lake Okeechobee TMDL is not being met? Pam, could you take this question?
Sure. Great question, Mark. I think that I would need my crystal ball to be able to answer that question. But as the BMaps are unfolding and evolving through this iterative process of implementing things, getting data to provide that feedback loop back into the BMaps to adjust as we move forward in time, we'll better be able to answer that question. So it's just a matter of time and letting the process take its go through its process. Thanks for that question.
Carmela?
Yes.
So this is Jennifer Reynolds. I just wanted to add on to Pam's answer as well on this one, because I think this is something that we're all concerned about, right? There's a lot of nutrients going into the various watersheds and into multiple basins, and they start to converge at Lake Okeechobee and at the estuaries. And so it starts to seem to be an overwhelming task in order to feel like we can really make a difference. And I just want to articulate that I am very hopeful and very confident that together we can chip away at this. And so although the TMDL, meeting the TMDL in Lake Okeechobee is daunting, and we have a twofold problem there. We have nutrients coming into the lake as well as the remediation required within the lake itself. As we look at the St. Lucie watershed and the effects to the St. Lucie estuary, as projects are completed, we increasingly are able to prevent the undesirable lake releases into the estuary. And so it becomes even more important that we focus on how do we reduce the nutrients in the subbasins that feed the estuary directly. And I feel very confident that in the near future, now not the next 12 months, but certainly in the next decade, that if we can get a handle on the nutrients within the basin itself, that we will be able to make very, very significant progress on meeting the TMDL within the estuary.
That's great. Okay, I have a follow-up question from Gary Ritter, Jody, on the question about local expertise. Gary's question was whether the local expertise were district personnel.
Yes, so we want to get feedback from every impacted stakeholder, interested party. So that could be the members of the public, local municipalities, or any of the coordinating agencies.
And Jody, we also got a question here from Jim Riley asking where he can get these great presentation slides.
This presentation will be posted following this workshop, and you can get, that will be posted to the website.
Great. The next question is for Anthony Betts. So Anthony, here is a question from Michael Connor. He's asking if the Calkins water farm capacity is already being met at this time.
Hi. Yeah, the Calkins project has been operating on and off throughout August, and the project has stored approximately 2.5 billion gallons in an effort to prevent and reduce discharges to the St. Lucie estuary. But at this time, the project is very near full storage capacity. So we're operating those pumps as storage is created through seepage and evapotranspiration. Thanks.
Thank you, Anthony. We have a question here from Mark Perry, and I'm thinking that probably this question can be to Pam. So since S48, S49, S80, and Gordy Road are district control structures connecting canals, works of the district to the St. Lucie estuary, why isn't the district requiring landowners to store and treat their water before it enters the works of the district, and you are discharging the polluted water into the St. Lucie estuary? We can rely on regional or SERP projects to make all the necessary phosphorus and nitrogen reductions to meet the TMDL.
Great question. So the district does require permits under the Environmental Resource Program for entities to connect to our system. And depending on when they receive that permit, the rules have evolved over time, but and have gotten more strict in current times. So they're required to retain water so that they get some assimilation of nutrients before they discharge. So that is where the district has the authority currently to regulate connections to our system.
Okay. All right. The next question is from Merritt Matheson. And this question I think is good for Jody. Stewart aspires for a future with non-emergency flows into the St. Lucie estuary only originating from the tidal basin. How helpful will the current planned projects be at achieving this goal? What is the overall timing?
So that is an excellent question. And I think there are several different ways that we can look at this. One is looking at the individual planned projects and what the design plans are for those projects. And I can tell you that there's a number of Indian River Lagoon South CERT projects that are intended for that specific purpose to send flows through the tidal basins North and South Fork to mimic what occurred historically. As far as timing, each project is on its own path. A number of the Indian River Lagoon South projects are just starting the design, so they're starting to plan for those projects coming online. There are other projects such as the natural areas and the restoration projects that are also under the Indian River Lagoon South. The timing for those are a little more into the future because the district wants to focus on the major construction project components first.
Carmela, I'm going to jump in again.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I just wanted to also provide some information to our listeners that the integrated delivery schedule, which is the roadmap of how we're completing the large projects associated with the Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan, that is being updated. And there will be several public workshops in the coming months that people can participate in so that they can see the entire schedule. And I'm looking at the October 2019 update. So this is the update from last year. And several of those components are listed already on the integrated delivery schedule. And so the components that we're talking about are not only the C44 reservoir and STA that most folks are familiar with that are completing in the next year, but also the C23, C24 reservoirs. There are two of those, Reservoir North and Reservoir South, as well as an associated STA, and then a reservoir and STA at the C25. And the design and construction of those are currently scheduled to start in the next, actually some of the design has already started on those. And so that design is ongoing, and then construction is currently scheduled to complete in the next 8 to 9 years, depending on the feature.
Oh, thank you for the clarification. Okay, so the next question is from Kevin Maciasek. I hope I didn't mispronounce your last name. So Kevin asks, I didn't hear any discussion regarding nutrient reduction limits imposed by the BMap changes. How were the nitrogen and phosphorus limits determined? These requirements really put a burden on utilities without much involvement or notice. Is there to be future funding to help with modifications to achieve these limits? And maybe this question could be for Sarah with DEP.
Yes, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, good. Yeah, thank you for the question. I mean, we did have a lot of meetings and discussion on these things during development of the BMAP, but I understand that a lot of times the folks involved in the BMAP development or the updates are not necessarily utilities. And those limits really came about from several years ago. Those things started in some of our Springs BMAPs in other parts of the state. And they're an attempt to tackle some of the sources that we see in the watershed that aren't necessarily dealt with through the normal types of projects through this policy approach. And that's probably something that you'll see in a lot of the BMAPs statewide moving forward as they get updated.
Great. The next question is from Mark Perry, and I think this is a good question for Jennifer. It says, the NEP calls for the joint effort between the South Florida Water Management District, the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. When will you form a transparent task group of these three agencies to implement the NEP and the watershed protection plans?
Thanks, Mark, for asking this question, because this is something we're actually looking forward to sharing. So about 2 weeks ago, the three agencies met to talk about this exact question. And we agreed that our next set of workshops will be jointly held with our three agencies so that we can present to the public the ongoing activities that each of the agencies have, as well as be able to take questions from the public about our ongoing and future projects and activities. And so we look forward to starting that next round of workshops at the end of this calendar year.
Oh, well, our next question is from Ben Hogarth. And I think this question is good for Ted Saltas with DEP. The City of Stuart has worked hard for years to meet TMDL BMAP goals, but we're concerned about the influx of nutrient pollution from Lake Okeechobee discharges. Is there any assurance the city and other municipal agencies will not be held responsible for the addition of pollution from unwanted discharges?
Hi, yeah, this is Ted. Can you hear me all right?
I can.
Okay, great. The department will continue to allocate the TN and TP load reductions to local stakeholders based only on the starting loads for which they're responsible. Any future changes to the local load allocations in the BMAP would undergo a stakeholder review process, any future BMAP amendments would there'd be an opportunity for stakeholder review, right? If BMAP compliance is not achieved in the estuary because of releases from Lake Okeechobee, then what that means is local stakeholders wouldn't be held responsible for reductions beyond the required reductions prescribed in this adopted BMAP.
All right. So I am here looking at the screen and we don't have any open questions. So if you have any additional questions, I'm going to give you like 30 seconds if you have anything else that you would like to follow up on or a new question. And otherwise, we'll move to the next portion of our workshop. Perfect. So here I have a question, and this question is good for Jody, I think. So Michael Connor is asking, is the district sampling C44 for nutrients?
Yes, the district does sample for the C44 basin. We sample for total phosphorus, total nitrogen, as well as the speciation that make up those parameters.
Great. Okay, so I have another question from Michael. So his question is, what is the total phosphorus and total nitrogen doing? How is it doing now that the logs are open today? And I think that maybe that's a question I can answer. So we don't have, you know, immediate phosphorus and nitrogen concentration levels available that are collected, and then it takes probably 3 to 4 weeks to be analyzed and the results reported. Oh, okay. So Michael is asking for a ballpark on C44 discharge levels. So Jody, you probably have some information from your knowledge on the C44 typical levels.
Yes, so so for the C44 basin, looking at annual averages from the past 5 years, the levels typically are 348 micrograms per liter total phosphorus and around 1,300 micrograms per liter of total nitrogen.
Carmela, I think you were muted.
Hey.
There you go.
Hello, I am sorry, I was muted. So the next question is from Mark Perry. And I think this question is probably good for Sarah Davis with DEP. So it says the TMDL was established in 2009 and the BMap was adopted in 2013. In the first 5-year phase, agriculture was given reductions for land use changes and 90% target BMP's enrollment of 167 metric tons of total nitrogen and 43 metric tons of total phosphorus. How can they get credit for these two things?
Sure, thanks, Mark, for the question. I'll answer the two things separately. So with the land use changes, what happens is, for anyone who doesn't follow the BMap process very much, is we have a point in time, it's a snapshot basically, where we take a land use, a period of record for rainfall, and that kind of gives us an idea of the loading coming from the various sources. And so when there are significant changes, like especially in this area where the loss of citrus, conversion to other land use types, we can account for that through those projects. And so it's not a functional, structural project per se, but it's just an accounting exercise. And that's the land use change project that you're asking about. The other types of projects are where there are BMPs, there are landowners enrolled in BMPs. And currently what we've been doing in the BMAPs is giving a certain percentage efficiency from the loading coming off of those lands based on several studies within the South Florida area, based on the commodity of the enrolled land or landowner. And so that's really our best guess of what those suite of BMPs are getting at the time. But that's why, as Jody mentioned earlier, it's really important for us to have this measured data to check everything, because we know that we're estimating, we know that we're using models, and we in the BMAP and then as well in the district watershed protection plan, we're checking behind using the measured data.
Thank you, Sarah. I have here a question from Mary Mathison. I think this question is probably good for Jody. So Mary asks, does the district consider C44, C23, and C24 basin runoff into the St. Lucie estuary as natural?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. I mean, I think when you say that does the district consider, I don't think we classify runoff as necessarily natural versus man-made, but I mean, I think just by knowing that those canals were not historically there, they were, created by man. I mean, I would say that the district is not considered a natural. That's how I would answer that.
Thank you, Jody. And Meredith, if you would like to clarify your question, that'll be good too. If there's anything in particular. Okay. So we have no open questions. And I will just give it a couple of seconds. So it seems that we can move into the Menti portion, the second phase of the Menti questions. And thank you so much for all your great questions. And thank you to all the panelists who provided fantastic responses on the spot. All right, bye.
Thanks, Carmela. All right, well, so now we're going to get into another round of Menti questions, considering the information that was presented at today's presentation. You can sign in just as was done before using the instructions on the screen. Again, you don't need to create an account. You just go to the website, menti.com, and enter today's code shown on the slide. And I will turn it over again to MD to lead us through the second portion of the survey. And after that, we will wrap up with public comments.
Thank you, Jody. Welcome back to the second part of interactive Menti session. Just a friendly reminder that I will give everyone about 1 minute to answer each question. In your opinion, which of the following considerations should be given top priority when determining where assessments or more projects are needed? Each participant can choose more than one answer. Almost 15 seconds left to complete this answer. Thank you, and the voting has closed, and we can see that that the total load, unit area load, and discharge volume should be considered while determining your projects. Our next question. This slide shows 5 years of data from the 5 basins in the St. Lucie River watershed. Based on the data presented, which basin do you think need more data assessments or additional projects? You can select more than one basin. The votes are coming in, and the top 3 candidates are 10 Mile Creek, C24 and C23 basin. Oh no, there's a jump, shift between tidal and C23. And in the presentation and the data that was analyzed by the district, Jody mentioned 10 Mile Creek and C24 were the main candidates that will be used for further studies or further discussions. Should the focus for St. Lucie estuary restoration be on projects that address flow, concentration, or both? Yep. Thank you. It was a very interactive question, and I couldn't agree more than that. With both flow and concentration should be considered while designing the projects. Next question is, after seeing the presentation or based on your experience and knowledge, what type of projects or activities should the coordinating agencies pursue? And as a friendly reminder, the coordinating agencies are FDEP, FDEX, and South Florida Water Management District. You can type in your answers as words.
MD, we might just need to give folks a little bit more time on this one.
Sure. So the top choices are regional storage, septic conversion, septic to sewer conversion, water storage, 10 Mile Creek nutrient reduction, reduced flow into St. Lucie River watershed, best management practices, regional projects, so the cloud map shows that the top more choices are septic conversion, storage, and regional projects. After seeing the presentation or based your experience and knowledge, what types of projects or activities should local stakeholders pursue? And you can type your answers in words. So the suggestions are use septic to sewer conversions, public education, stormwater treatment areas. And as we have closed the polls, the top 3 choices, the public education, septic to sewer conversion. Thank you. Do you agree with the selected basins as a priority for future investigations as mentioned in Jody's presentation? We see majority of the responses, they agree with the district expertise and they're relying on the subject matter experts. We do have a 1 vote for disagreement. And as Jody said, that we are not set in stone and we will be looking and studying all of the issues in the area. The next question is regarding what would you like to see or gain out of the next round of workshops? And you can type your ideas, which will appear as a word cloud on the screen. We'd like to see more public participation. More agencies coordination.
Maybe we could give folks a couple more seconds on this one too.
Sure, I will add another minute to this one. The main responses we have: coordinating agencies, potential water quality regulations, local governments projects, more public participation, more water quality data. Definitely agree on that. Local expert inputs, because they know their land, their area very well. More strict BMPs for ag. Updated data, the next steps. Thank you all for your suggestions. This slides ask for a feedback on the format of the meeting. So please provide your feedback on the format of this meeting. And you can strongly disagree, and agree on the different formats of the meeting. It's a scaling question. So you can move the slider back and forth to give a response. And I will give another minute for this survey question. to see that we have a mediocre score for internet streaming over in-person meetings. And definitely we are in such a situation that we are doing our best to engage the public about this process. But definitely in-person meetings are my favorite too. Thank you. For the content was meaningful and easy to understand. And definitely Menti is helping to collect the public input. And this concludes the Menti portion of the meeting. Thank you for your participating in the interactive survey. I am going to hand the workshop back to Jyoti Hutchinson to lead us further. It's your Jyoti.
Thank you, MD. Just give me a second. I can share my screen again. Okay, so now we will open it up for public comments. We were asking that everyone only take one turn in the interest of providing everyone an opportunity to speak. You will have 3 minutes to make your comment. And remember that you can always leave your comments on our website if you'd prefer to do it that way. To make your public comment, please use the raise your hand feature and we will call on you to speak. As of right now, I don't see anybody's hand raised. Give it a couple of minutes. Okay, we have Mark Perry. Please proceed with your comment.
No, thank you. And thank you for the informative presentation. Appreciate it. You know, our watershed protection plans are important to carry forward in unison, particularly with NEEP and the Okeechobee, Caloosahatchee, and St. Lucie watersheds are all vitally important. In protecting us watersheds, we have to recognize how large the watershed has been improved by the canals and the drainage that we provide in the district, works of the district. And really, we need to go up into the watersheds. In 1999, there was a study commissioned by the district through PBS&J about all the 186 subbasins within the watershed of St. Lucie. And it was really identified for the top 10 producers of total nitrogen, total phosphorus, and total TSS. So we're really have a handle on where the pollutants are coming from into the estuary. And we really need to go upstream and require the landowners in those basins to retain and detain their water and treat the water at the source of the problem, not downstream in large regional projects, in my opinion. So we really need to get a handle on how do we best do that. And if it's through BMPs or other sources, we need to go to those sources and work with those landowners to reduce those inflows into the canals that eventually end up into the estuary. So we really need a handle on that. And the second thing, lastly, is, of course, Lake Okeechobee. And unless we have a true meeting of 105 metric tons a year, which is now well over 500, sometimes up to 1,000 metric tons a year coming into the lake. And then we have, you know, we're not meeting the TMDL 40 parts per billion in the lake. Every time we get the largest freshwater inflow to the St. Lucie estuary is from Lake Okeechobee. And when we get that inflow, we get huge deliveries of nitrogen, phosphorus, and total suspended solids. So I implore you, we need to incorporate that, not just recognize that Lake Okeechobee is a significant input to the St. Lucie estuary, but is the largest input of freshwater volume flows, inclusive of high nutrient and nitrogen and phosphorus. So however we can get a handle on Lake Okeechobee regulation, moving that water south and rather than east and west into the estuaries, and also get a handle on source of the pollution problem in the watershed, I would appreciate you all moving forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mark, for that comment. Do we have any other public comments? Please use the raise your hand feature. Okay, we have Benina Whalen.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to comment. And I concur with Mark that good information is being provided. I would encourage, one of my comments during the polling was to try to engage. I know we're in difficult times here, but to try to engage with some of the local area experts more directly for input before decisions are made. And I know that Mark recognized the extensive regional system that's been put in place in Florida on the landscape, which has significantly altered the hydrology and water quality, as well as the other aspects of water resources in the state, and in particular the St. Lucie watershed. So I have a little bit of disagreement in the discussion about not necessarily needing to be relying on regional projects. I think the cause of a lot of the changes that we're experiencing is the water delivery system. So I think it needs to be a combination of tools that have been presented, but it does need to include sub-regional and regional projects. And from my experience, I believe the landowners are willing to participate and be a part of the solution, but we can't leave out the very necessary sub-regional and regional projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Benita, for that comment. Do we have any other public comments? If you'd like to make your comment, please use the raise your hand feature. Okay, I'm not seeing anybody else. So I guess we can go ahead and wrap it up. Thank you, everybody, for your participation today. Again, if you would like to leave us a comment, if you'd prefer to go to the website and do it that way, we would appreciate that. And thank you so much for participating today. Have a great day, everybody.